American companies are doing to help grow the economy of our chief competitor on the planet, which is using that strong economy, by the way, to arm itself and threaten its neighbors in the region. We need to know, and this legislation will allow us to know exactly what's going on so we can consider whether other policy provisions are necessary. We know the House passed its own version of the NDAA last month, but it didn't include any provisions on this outbound investment issue. So I'm confident in the coming weeks, members of the House and the Senate will need to iron out the differences between our two versions, and it's absolutely critical that this outbound investment transparency that the Senate so enthusiastically supported be part of that final conference report. We all know the Chinese Communist Party has become increasingly aggressive in its efforts to gain power and influence through intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, predatory lending practices like the Belt and Road Initiative. China has grown its economic power and is using these same methods to pursue global military dominance. In China, there's no bright line separating the military and civilian sectors. This is part of an intentional strategy known as military-civil fusion, which promotes the development of dual-use technology. In other words, can be used in the private sector and can be used by the People's Liberation Army. In short, the Chinese Communist Party is investing its technologies that bolster both its military strength and its economic power. And unfortunately, many American entities are fueling the success of China's military-civil fusion, maybe even without knowing really what they are doing. In testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee, an unusual open hearing, I heard some concerning figures that illustrate just how big this problem is. At the end of 2020, U.S. investments in Chinese companies had a total market value of $2.3 trillion. That's foreign investments from the United States into the People's Republic of China worth $2.3 trillion in 2020. That included $21 billion in semiconductors, $54 billion to Chinese military companies, and a whopping $221 billion in artificial intelligence. There's been a lot of discussion here in the Senate and in Washington, D.C. about what's the future of artificial intelligence. Well, American companies have been investing a lot of money in China and helping them develop their artificial intelligence capabilities. And we know this authoritarian country, under the leadership of President Xi, does not have benign intentions. We need to be very careful about exactly how much and in what sectors the American business community is investing in China when they are our number one global competitor. Intentionally or not, American companies are bankrolling the Chinese Communist Party's military rise. They're pouring huge amounts of capital into capabilities that could be used against the United States and certainly against our allies. These few data points are deeply concerning, but the truth is, these are just a few pieces of the puzzle. We can't see the full picture, but we need to. Currently, there are no requirements for companies to report billion-dollar investments in Chinese companies. The full extent of U.S. investments could be much larger and more concerning, but we simply don't have the information. That's exactly why Senator Casey and I offered this amendment and why the Senate adopted it so overwhelmingly, 91-6. The strong bipartisan support for this amendment is evidence that this bill strengthens our national security without impacting the free market. We're not interested in decoupling from China, as some people have advocated. And I think Secretary Blinken and Secretary Yellen have used the word de-risking is an appropriate use of that term. We're trying to de-risk our economies in our two countries, so hopefully it will never come to any open conflict. We want to make sure that we are strong enough to deter China from ever even thinking about invading Taiwan, for example. But as our colleagues know, the requirement of reporting or providing notice of U.S.-based investments in China, it does not apply to every investment under the sun, the one that we just voted on. It's a highly targeted amendment and only applies to sensitive technologies like semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and hypersonics. These are the technologies and capabilities that pose the greatest national security risk to the United States of America. And to be clear, it does not stop investments from happening or interfere with other investments by American companies in the People's Republic of China. It simply requires companies or other entities to share information about investments in certain technologies. This is all about transparency. It will help the United States see and understand the threats from China and other countries of concern so we can act accordingly. Some of our colleagues had said, well, we need to do more. I agree. But I think this is an important first step. And certainly this, when we say politics is the art of the possible, this is what's possible now. And I would hope with additional information that's generated from these transparency measures, we can make a decision at some later point whether different policies need to be applied. But for now, this represents an important first step.